Hello YouTube! Today we have a very nice electric bike value for money by the ENGWE brand for review with 20 inches fat tire rims and powerful hub motor. It is a Chinese bike but came to us from European warehouse. This bike is very famous on YouTube. With a quick research I saw that a lot of YouTubers have reviewed this particular bike, but none of them have tested the capacity of the battery, the controller quality and the hub motor to check how good and reliable it is. The bike was fairly well packed, however it has some minor scratches from loose objects and tools, which apparently came loose due to transport. The bike comes with a standard 54.6 volts 2 amps charger and 2.5mm plug. The bike from the first glance looks impressive, with that bright orange color and the thick tires. In the box there are also quick assembly keys, which are sent by the factory. Another strong point of the bike is that the entire frame is made from aluminum. Another strong point is the very compact rear rack, which could easily be used to place the delivery box. The bike comes with a very nice YL-ATC monochrome LCD display with very large setting buttons. Important thing with these monochrome screens is that the readings are visible in all environment conditions. By the factory, the bike only works with pass assistant, so the next step is to activate the throttle. To do this, first you need to close the screen from the bottom button of the control, then you must open it again. And once you open it, press plus and minus button at the same time. After a second, you must press plus and minus button again at the same time. Then you are looking to find for H&D setting. Then you press the upper side button for OK. After that, on the screen lower left you will get an indication HL. There you must select N option and press OK. Lower left the indication will change to HF. There you will choose Y option. At the end, press plus and minus together to save the settings. The impression after the first ride with me on it at 78 kilos and 177 height person is a very soft and comfortable ride by fat tires and soft front suspension. The motor torque is very satisfying. Basically you feel a very solid bike. Another very impressive thing that I have got from this bike is how nice aluminum welding they have done for such a cheap and decent bike. Let's start with the controller, to see where it is, to check the specification and build quality. As you can see, the controller located inside the frame of the bike, in a sealed place quite far from the ground, so that you don't get rainwater in the frame while riding. The first disadvantage I see from the controller side is the connectors of the phase motor wires. As you know, I don't recommend them at all, and especially for a powerful motor at 750 watts. At this point the first problem will appear because the connectors were not designed for high power motors and will overheat. So to prevent a future short circuit I will do that I always do, soldering the connectors. After inspecting the wiring, it seems that the factory have taken care to put silicone on the connectors to prevent moisture issues. An important detail is to check the heatsink screws of the controller is very important, because it is where the internal MOSFET heatsink join the outer casing of the controller, so that the MOSFET temperatures must be transferred to the environment so they do not overheat. Another important point is to check the thermal paste between the inside and the outside heatsink. In this case it is very fresh, so there is a lot of good thermal contact between of heatsinks. Regarding the controller circuit, it is quite clean and seriously made with reinforced power lines and varnish coating. Other good thing about the frame is that the controller space is quite large, so we can do a small upgrade. For example, to put a bigger controller, because the existing one from the factory, as you can see, it works only at 18 amps, which means that it output approximately 850 watts at startup, while our motor is rated at 750 watts, so normally the motor can draw up to 1500 watts at startup, which is normally 65% of the motor's power. This is because the factories, to ensure the long-term operation of the motor, put smaller controllers to limit it, so that the owner will not be able to overheat his motor on uphill. One small change that I made was to put small piece of foam on the side of the controller to stick it to the frame of the bike, to cool the controller as much as possible. Now it is time to check the battery, to see what batteries it has inside, what condition they are, and if it will manage to get the capacity which written on the label. The battery is 48 volts 30 amps with a rated capacity of 624 watts per hour. Maximum charge voltage at 54.6 volts. Battery charging can be at maximum 5 amps. Battery zero start discharge should be below than 60 amps. So we can change the controller to 30 amps at 48 volts to get the maximum motor performance with no other modifications. The battery, as you see, is sealed as much as possible. It is fixed inside the case with the pads, and most important, it has holders. The most important of all, because there must be a distance between the batteries. On most bikes of this same type, the batteries very easily catch fire due to short circuit because they don't have holders. They don't have elementary protection between the batteries. As you can see, the specifications on the case label have exactly the same specifications as the batteries. The next check we have to do is to check the nickel strips, which after a short time leave their places, as usually on poorly made batteries. But here we have well spot welded 2 times on each battery. Then we go to check if it has the battery green paper head insulations, which in this pack we have all of them plus the battery holders. So, in terms of security level, they are well covered. The next step is to check how balanced the batteries are. There we will understand how good they are. If we see voltage difference between the batteries, it means that they are poor quality, or they have been in the warehouse for a long time before being used, or has been improperly assembled by the factory. For example, batteries of different voltages and dates have been mixed. On this point I just impressed. As you can see, all 13S they are exactly at the same voltages of 3.67 volts and also at 50% of charge. The only thing that bothers me about the battery is the BMS, which is just a protection board. So maybe after a while the battery just will need to be balanced by the external device to return it to its original state. Now it is time to put the battery for a capacity test to see how many amps it will get and compare it to the factory capacity of the battery pack. Measuring the empty battery, it is reasonable to notice slightly larger differences. This happens to all battery packs. It is important that after charging they must return to full balance. After the second charge, as you can see, the batteries return to exactly the same voltages and at full balance. This is a very good sign to understand how good our battery is. Now it is time to open the motor and see it from inside. I am so impressed by the rear fork, that how thick the metal is, about 8.5 mm. On this ENGWE bike this point is very well designed to hold the motor shaft in place. On most bikes it is the weakest point. Very often we see shafts that have twisted and cut the phase wires and the whole sensors, with the result sensors inside the motor to burn. The motor looks serious, it is very clean inside, there is fresh grease on the gears, a very interesting felt with a metal spring at the point of the shaft to prevent water and moisture from getting inside to the motor. The motor has an extra magnetic sensor inside, as you can see, which measures the revolution of the motor and convert it to speed. Now let's rate the bike by categories. On weight the bike only gets 2 stars, because it is quite big and heavy. In quality it gets 3 stars. As we said, in general the bike size is quite big, so you feel a security driving it. In field of welding it gets 4 stars, a very good rating because the welding on the frame are very professional. At the battery category, first is the balance. There we get almost all the stars. Because the battery from the factory is built and balanced correctly, in the field of quality it gets almost 4 stars. Because the battery has almost all necessary things, such as well-welded nickel strips, heat shrink sealed with silicone, the battery gets full capacity after a capacity test, and pads on the sides to keep the battery solid and do not move inside the case. At capacity field, we have 3 stars, because of 13 amps of capacity. We can make 35 to 40 km range. And at safety we have 4 stars, because of space between batteries, of the battery holders and green paper gasket. Generally, from me personally, the bike is highly recommended. With only $1,000 it is like stealing the company with that it offers you. If we compare that, a 750 watt kit with battery today is cost around $650 to $800. So guys, that's it with the ENGWE bike, and see you on next video.